Good morning again. Now I am on the Arabian Peninsula, Al Jazeera Al Arabiya, and to my east is the Persian Gulf, beyond which is Iran, which, by the way, not long ago had a serious encounter with the United States Navy on the northern area of the Persian Gulf. To my west is the Arabian Desert, some oases, but mostly 500 billion barrels of oil. And those 500 billion barrels of oil are going to be part of a major new area of instability, especially in Saudi Arabia, as I will explain to you now. Saudi Arabia is the biggest, with over half of the peninsula's petroleum, and it seems to be among the most stable countries in the world. Well, that's what it looks like on the surface. That's what the late King Abdullah wanted you to believe, and that's what the new King Salman wants you to believe. But I didn't travel halfway around the world to give you the party line. No, I came here to interact informally with average citizens, whether from the ruling elites or not, whether from the dominant Sunni majority or from the Shiite minority. Even the average citizen here, though, when talking to Americans, tends to stress what they call the great stabilizers of society. They talk about an idea that's hard for most Westerners to understand, the idea that somehow modern society and technology are totally compatible with Islam. This is why, they say, the official state religion of Saudi Arabia is Islam. This is why they say the ruling family of Saudi Arabia must abide by the dictates of the ulama, the religious scholars who review all the governmental decisions. This is why, they say, the official criminal law of Saudi Arabia is Sharia law. And this is why they insist it makes total sense for the Constitution of Saudi Arabia to be none other than the Quran itself. You'd think that the broad modernization of this economy would naturally have come with a parallel modernization of its government, and indeed, back in the 1970s, that's precisely what was beginning to happen. But then something very strange happened, which dramatically shifted the trajectory of Saudi history. Almost 37 years ago, in November and December of 1979, extremists calling for the overthrow of the royal family took over the Grand Mosque of Mecca, the Masjid al-Haram. And throughout the occupation of that Grand Mosque, the king pleaded with the ulama, the religious scholars, for permission to send in his troops and end that occupation forcefully. Ultimately, actually, the imams relented under one extremely critical condition. In exchange for granting that one request to the king, they mandated a permanent end to all political and social reforms that were underway. That's what happened 37 years ago. Now fast forward to 2016, and to this day, we still see aspects of Saudi society that can be traced back to that singular pact that the king made with the ulama. The absolute authority of the king, the royal family, and the ulama in all aspects of government. That has not changed. Their absolute authority over the economy. That has not changed. Their absolute authority over the nation's politics, culture, and press. Also unchanged. And their absolute authority over the oil industry. Now, all this, most people here say, is what makes this society stable, not unstable. But as we saw in the latter days of the Roman Empire, as we saw in the latter days of the British Empire and the Soviet Union, and now even the European Union, what may appear to be pillars of stability can actually be the roots of chaos. Let's go through each of these so-called stabilizing factors one by one, and you'll see exactly what I mean. Yes, the king and the ulama have absolute authority over the government, but the end result is that the government is overrun by members of the royal family who control key ministries, defense, interior, foreign affairs. Yes, the king and the ulama have absolute authority over the economy, but the end result has been a massive concentration of wealth. Just a few thousand royal family members control 90% of the massive wealth that Saudi Arabia has accumulated over the years. Yes, they have complete authority over the nation's politics, culture, and press, which gives the aura of stability. But as in many modern societies today, they're woefully impotent when it comes to controlling social media, even within the royal family itself. In fact, one prominent member of the royal family has recently circulated an unprecedented letter calling for the king to step down. He declared that the king is incapable of managing war, incapable of stopping oil prices from sinking, and incapable of meeting the biggest challenges in Saudi Arabia's entire history. And yes, they've used their authority to thoroughly modernize the oil industry, but today the Saudi Arabian government relies almost entirely on oil revenues to finance its huge budget. In fact, it was so confident it could continue to depend on oil revenues that it never bothered to even pass laws for collecting taxes, including income taxes. So instead of going down, the government's reliance on oil revenues has gone up over the years. Instead of being a stabilizing factor, the oil industry has emerged as a major factor that could destabilize and even ravage the Saudi economy. Look in this chart how the royal family's government spending has been rising steadily with virtually no opportunity to cut it back. And yeah, it made a few attempts to slow down the rise here and there, but none of those attempts worked very well. Moreover, look how the royal family has failed to control Saudi revenues, which surge and plunge in tandem with oil prices. And look how those revenues have suddenly plunged now. Here's the key. As long as the oil revenues were flowing, the royal family could diffuse the rising discontent in this country by showering average citizens with lavish social benefits. They got free education, they got free health care, they got the no-tax environment, and much more. But all that is now at risk in this current era of depressed oil revenues. So yes, this peninsula is huge, and yes, it is rich. But the trend I see here is consistent with the trends I've been hammering on ever since I began this series of videos. Overly aggressive and complacent government controls and intervention, extreme wealth concentration, and extreme political polarization, whether visible or behind the scenes. All setups for likely black swan events that could drive massive amounts of flight capital to safer havens like the United States.